Have you ever wondered whether one simple habit could start changing your blood pressure by tomorrow morning? Because when people hear the phrase high blood pressure, they usually think of medication, salt, stress, genetics, aging, maybe exercise. They do not usually think of a bathtub, and certainly not a very specific bathing habit that has been part of daily life in Japan for generations. But that is exactly what I want to talk about today. Now, I want to be honest with you right from the start. This is not going to be one of those videos that tells you some magical ritual lowers blood pressure overnight and then quietly hopes you never ask how. I find that kind of content deeply unhelpful because what is actually happening in the body is much more interesting than a wellness slogan. What I want to do today is walk you through a Japanese habit that researchers have been studying for years, and more importantly, why it may affect blood pressure so quickly. We are going to talk about your blood vessels, your nervous system, your stress response, body temperature, and one very important detail that most people miss completely: timing. And by the end of this video, the idea in the title should make sense to you, not because I said so, but because the physiology makes it hard to ignore. The habit I am talking about is this: a warm evening bath, not a scorching bath, not a random dip in hot water whenever you feel like it, a properly timed warm bath in the evening, done in a way that works with the body instead of against it. That may sound almost too simple, but sometimes the most powerful health ideas are simple at the surface and surprisingly sophisticated underneath. So let's build this from the ground up. The first thing you need to understand is that blood pressure is not a fixed number. It is not one setting that stays the same all day. It rises and falls constantly in response to posture, stress, temperature, hydration, hormones, activity, sleep, and something called autonomic tone, which is a technical way of describing the balance between the fight or flight side of your nervous system and the rest and recover side. That balance matters more than most people realize. When your sympathetic nervous system is dominant, heart rate tends to rise, blood vessels tend to tighten, and blood pressure tends to go up. When your parasympathetic system has more influence, the body shifts toward relaxation, recovery, and wider blood vessels. That tends to move pressure in the opposite direction. And here is where the story gets interesting. Warm water changes that balance. When you lower your body into warm water, several things begin happening at once. Your skin temperature rises, blood vessels near the surface start to dilate, blood flow changes, the body senses heat and begins adjusting circulation to release it. In simple terms, your vascular system opens up. That opening matters because blood pressure is heavily influenced by resistance. If the blood vessels are tighter, the heart has to push against more resistance. If the vessels are more relaxed and more open, that resistance falls. And when resistance falls, blood pressure can fall with it. That is one of the core ideas behind this entire video. The question is not only how much blood your heart pumps, the question is what kind of vascular landscape that blood is moving through. Now, let me add another layer because warm bathing does more than warm the skin. In immersion, water presses against the body. That hydrostatic pressure changes circulation in a way dry heat does not. Blood shifts differently, venous return changes, the heart responds, the body senses the altered load. And then, if the water temperature is in the right range, the vasodilation effect can outweigh the stress of that shift, which is one reason researchers think warm bathing may influence cardiovascular function in a meaningful way. This is not just theory. In Japan, where tub bathing is deeply embedded in everyday culture, researchers have looked at this from more than one angle. In a very large, long-term study involving more than 30,000 middle-aged adults, people who bathed almost daily had lower risk of cardiovascular disease and stroke compared with those who bathed much less often. Now, that is an association, not proof of cause. It does not mean the bath alone created the result. People with certain bathing habits may also differ in other ways, but the signal is strong enough that it deserves attention. And then there is the more immediate angle, which brings us closer to the promise in this video's title. In studies involving older adults in Japan, nighttime hot spring bathing was associated with lower blood pressure the next morning, not months later, the next morning. That is the part I really want you to hold on to. Because once you hear that, the question changes. It is no longer just, is bathing generally good for relaxation? The question becomes, what is happening between the evening bath and the next morning blood pressure reading? And the answer leads us straight into the nighttime physiology that most people never think about. Your blood pressure follows a daily rhythm. In healthy patterns, it tends to dip during sleep and then rise again in the morning as the body prepares to wake up. That morning rise is normal, but in some people, it becomes exaggerated. The nervous system revs too hard. Stress hormones climb. Blood vessels are less relaxed than they should be. The heart and arteries meet the morning in a more constricted state. That is one reason morning blood pressure matters so much. It is not just another reading. It often reflects how your body handled the entire night. So now think about what a warm evening bath might be doing. It may help shift the body away from a high alert state and toward a more parasympathetic, recovery oriented state before sleep. It may reduce vascular resistance through heat induced dilation. It may support relaxation. It may even influence sleep onset because your body temperature rises in the bath and then falls afterward, and that post bath cooling appears to help the brain recognize that it is time to sleep. That combination is not trivial. Better vascular tone, lower tension, better sleep transition, less physiological friction going into the night. Put all of that together, and the idea of a lower morning reading starts to sound a lot less mysterious. But now I need to tell you something extremely important, because this is where internet health content usually goes wrong. Hotter is not always better. A warm bath can help. An excessively hot bath can do the opposite. Once water gets too hot, especially above the low 40s Celsius, the body may start shifting back towards stress physiology. Heart rate rises more aggressively. The sympathetic nervous system can become more active. Blood pressure may stop falling and may even rise in some people. What looked like a calming ritual becomes a physical stressor. That is why the Japanese habit we are really talking about is not just heat. It is controlled heat. It is the kind of bath that relaxes the vascular system instead of provoking it. This distinction matters so much because people hear hot bath and imagine that if warm is helpful, blazing must be better. Biology almost never works that way. The body likes support. It does not usually reward extremes. Now, I want to spend a moment on why this habit is particularly Japanese in the public imagination. Because yes, warm bathing exists all over the world, but in Japan, bathing has historically been more structured, more regular, and more culturally integrated into the evening rhythm of life. It is not always treated as a rushed act of washing. It is often a transition, a deliberate shift from the active part of the day into the restorative part. And that may be part of the hidden power here. A habit is not just the thing itself. A habit is the cluster of signals around it. The time of day, the environment, the repetition, the meaning, the expectation. When you do the same calming ritual at the same time again and again, the nervous system begins to recognize the pattern. It learns the descent. That matters for blood pressure because blood pressure is not only chemical, it is contextual. It reflects the body's interpretation of the moment. Now let's talk about what most people are doing instead. The modern evening for a lot of people looks something like this: screens until late, bright light in the face, work thoughts carried into bed, a rushed dinner or a heavy one, maybe alcohol, maybe scrolling, maybe stress, then straight into sleep with the nervous system still humming like a refrigerator. And the next morning, the blood pressure is up. Not because one number ruined everything, but because the body never really had a smooth landing. This is why I find the bathing research so interesting. It is not just about water, it is about creating a physiological off-ramp. A warm bath in the evening tells the body something. The active phase is ending. The temperature changes. the vessels relax, the muscles let go, the day is over, and that message may carry into the night more powerfully than people expect. Now, to be very clear, I am not saying a bath cures hypertension. I am not saying one bath replaces treatment or that one habit cancels out every other factor involved in high blood pressure. Genetics matter, kidney function matters, weight, sleep, stress, medications, diet, alcohol, physical activity, and sodium all matter. What I am saying is narrower and I think more useful. There is credible evidence that a properly timed warm evening bath may improve the conditions under which the body manages blood pressure overnight, and that effect may show up as soon as the next morning. That is a very different claim from a miracle cure, and it is a much more defensible one. So, if we translate the research into practical terms, what does this Japanese habit actually look like? First, evening, not random afternoon, and not right before sprinting into some other stressful activity. The timing appears to matter because the goal is not just heat exposure. The goal is aligning the habit with the body's nightly transition. Second, warm water, not punishingly hot water. Think calming, not challenging. The point is vasodilation and relaxation, not turning the bath into an endurance event. Third, enough time to actually create a physiological shift. Not 30 seconds, not dipping your feet in and calling it a protocol. A real soak. Long enough for the body to respond, but not so long that the experience becomes draining. Fourth, get out slowly. This is one of those small details that sounds boring until it matters. When blood vessels dilate in warmth, standing too quickly can leave some people feeling lightheaded. The body needs a moment to readjust. And fifth, this habit works best as part of a sequence. Lower lights afterward, less stimulation afterward. Let the bath be the beginning of the night, not a brief interruption in the middle of chaos. That sequence may be more important than the internet likes to admit. Because if you take a warm bath and then immediately go back to stress, glare, messages, arguments, and work, you are fighting your own intervention. Now, there is one more reason this topic fascinates me, and it is this. Blood pressure responds to the environment faster than people think. We often imagine cardiovascular health as something slow and distant, something that only changes after months. And yes, long-term change matters. But short-term physiology matters too. One bad night can change a morning reading. One stressful conversation can change a reading. One deep breath can change a reading. One walk can change a reading. The cardiovascular system is constantly responding. So the idea that a warm evening bath could influence the next morning is not strange at all. It is exactly the kind of thing a responsive system would do. And once you see that, the title of this video stops sounding like a gimmick and starts sounding like what it really is, a question about whether your evening routine is helping your blood vessels or making the night harder than it needs to be. That is the real takeaway here. Not that Japan discovered magic water, not that you need to copy another culture blindly, but that one deeply ordinary habit, repeated at the right time and done in the right way, may support the cardiovascular system during one of the most important windows in the day, the transition into sleep and the rise into morning. So if I were to reduce this entire video to one sentence, it would be this. A warm evening bath may help lower next morning blood pressure, not because baths are mystical, but because blood vessels, nerves, temperature, and sleep all talk to each other. And once you understand that conversation, the habit makes sense. Let me close with something I think is worth saying directly. A lot of people live with high blood pressure as if it is just a number that appears on a machine. But that number is the surface of a much deeper story. It is the story of how tense or relaxed your vascular system is, how stressed or settled your nervous system is, how well or poorly your body moves from day into night and from night into morning. And sometimes the most useful change is not dramatic. Sometimes it is simply learning how to stop pushing the body at the exact moment it is trying to recover. That is what this Japanese habit represents. an evening pause, a temperature shift, a signal to the nervous system, a gentler vascular state, a better setup for sleep, and maybe by the next morning, a better blood pressure reading than the one you would have had otherwise. Not a promise, not a cure, but a meaningful possibility grounded in real physiology. So, tonight, when the day is winding down and your body is carrying everything it has been holding since morning, remember that your blood vessels are not separate from your routine. Your blood pressure is not separate from your evening, and your heart is listening to habits that feel too ordinary to matter. Sometimes those ordinary habits matter the most. If this video changed the way you think about blood pressure even a little bit, make sure to subscribe to the channel. And if you want, leave a comment telling me which part surprised you most: the role of heat, the timing, or the fact that tomorrow morning may already look different from tonight. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.